architect's idea was to evoke this feeling of sitting underneath a skylight. Very easy to imagine, very difficult to execute because this is the second floor of a 7-story building. For a musical performance, there was a single ray of light falling on the artist. This was done purposefully because we really wanted the focus to be inwards on the artist. And so the space doesn't feel static, it really feels dynamic and it kind of leaves you feeling energized.
Invite on stage Tripti Sahni from Studio Trace.
Let me begin by sharing a little bit about my journey. After a decade of architectural experience, I founded Studio Trace after falling in love with light while I was studying it during my master's from Parsons in New York. Being a lighting designer is a little bit like being a magician because light itself is not visible until it hits a surface. So unlike brick or stone or concrete, you're designing with something that you can't really see. But it has the ability to impact the color, the scale, and the texture of absolutely everything else that you put in the space. Very simply, if you think of an interior space as a gray box with some furniture in it, I can make it look 100 different ways just by changing the way in which I light it. As lighting designers, we harness this power of light to make the same space look entirely different at different points of time during the day without ever physically changing the architecture or the interiors. This is an example of a recently completed living room that we designed for India Bulls Blue, which shows you how the same space changes. The question is, how do we achieve this? We achieve it by modulating light in 4 main ways. The first is direction, or where the light is coming from. The next is intensity, which is how dim or bright the source is. Third is color, which is how warm or cool the temperature of the light is. And the fourth is distribution, which has to do with optics, which is how wide or narrow a beam of light is. Let me start by taking you through some project examples which show you how we do this. This is a yoga room beautifully designed by Pravi Sethi of Studio Hinge. It's located in the CCI Club, the Cricket Club of India, based in Bombay. And for here, the direction of light was very important because when you're doing yoga, you're often moving around the space. You're lying on your floor, you're looking up at your ceiling. So we wanted to make sure that whatever light we provided in the space had absolutely no glare. So all the fixtures are indirect. As you can see, they're concealed in the coves in your wall and your ceiling. The column capital was a bit of a challenge to light, but we still had to make sure that the space beneath it had light. It wasn't dark. So we designed what we refer to in the studio lovingly as these rings of Saturn, which is a wooden ring with the light source concealed within it, and the supports are so sleek that they seem to kind of hover and float around the column capital. So what is very interesting in the space, if you notice, is even though the light source is the same, the visual snippets that you get as you move your head from side to side when you're doing yoga look very different. That's because your direction of light changes. The way in which it hits the grooves change. And so the space doesn't feel static. It really feels dynamic, and it kind of leaves you feeling energized. Next is an office, again, for Studio Hinge. This is a view of the main cabin. As you can see, lots of natural light, lots of greenery. Our dog loves it. And in the main cabin, you have a lot of space and enough light to design with. However, because the main cabin is the only one which has a natural source of light, the rest of the space is quite rectangular, it's quite deep. And so where the rest of the team works, it can end up feeling a bit dark, a bit cavernous. The architect's idea was to evoke this feeling of sitting underneath a skylight. Very easy to imagine, very difficult to execute because this is the second floor of a 7-story building. It's not possible to give you a skylight. But what Pravi designed was this beautiful translucent ceiling. So the doors let in natural light, so you get some access to daylight. But the ceiling above is frosted, so you can't see the wiring, you can't see the supports. And we've actually placed our light sources within the timber grooves that you see running through. And so you land up with a space which is very comfortable. The light is soft, it's diffused, it's extremely flattering. The spacing was very important here because we had to make sure that there was enough space between the timber groove of the ceiling and the slab above, so the light could bounce off and then diffuse down. So everyone looks good, everyone feels good. Another bonus is that if you use warm light within offices, it's actually said that it increases creative collaboration and reduces conflict. So, we've seen that works quite well. Modulating distribution. So this was a study that we did in great detail for a recently completed project called IFB, or Ice Factory Ballad Estate. It's a phenomenal adaptive reuse project designed by Malik Architecture, located in Ballad Estate. It's housed in a 140-year-old building. The building used to house an ice factory, and now the programming is quite innovative. So it has a restaurant, it has a cafe, and it also is a center for design excellence. For us, the lighting design for this project was an exercise in how to highlight the beautiful brick and the wood that you see here, while also remaining flexible enough so that the space could light talks, performances, musical centers, etc. We had to make sure that the lighting allowed for flexibility, so we designed a track light system which was integrated within the roof. So at any point, you could horizontally illuminate your horizontal surfaces. You could light your horizontal surface as well as your vertical surface. So at times, if you notice the floor, you'll have these pools of light which direct you towards a work of art. And then, of course, when you stand in front of the artwork, you have this beautiful interplay of light and shadow. For a musical performance, there was a single ray of light falling on the artist. This was done purposefully because we really wanted the focus to be inwards on the artist, so all your peripheral lights were dimmed. And so you could really concentrate on the artist and his hauntingly beautiful music. The opposite was true for the photography exhibit, where the focus was outwards. And so our light lit the photography work on the vertical surfaces. This is Native, a fine dining Indian restaurant located on the first floor of the same project. And when we started working on it, it had a very interesting pre-existing lighting condition, which was there were these ribbed glass windows which wrapped around, which very softly diffused daylight inside the space. In the interiors, it has the same warm material palette that you see in the space below. You have your Burma teak, you have your Kota flooring. And so we really wanted to retain that warmth during the night when we lit the restaurant. So that's how it looks like. This is the way the entire restaurant looks. Very warm, very cozy. But we wanted to make sure that, your brick and your wood, the texture of it really came out. Because diffused daylight doesn't bring out those textures, it doesn't bring out the shadows. But the color rendering index of the light that we used here was very important because the red tones had to come out, otherwise the space would look completely washed out. So nothing was too bright or too dim. We had lights. We achieved this by layering the light very purposefully. So you have table lights, so you can see you can read your menu, you can see your food. Next, we have wall lights on your column. We have direct indirect fixtures on your walls and on your columns which run through the space. So we had different beams from your top and your bottom. And this was done purposefully because at your corners where your tables tend to be a bit dark, this gives you sufficient light. So the space doesn't feel congested. And of course, then you have the ceiling lights, right? So you have this beautiful wooden roof. There are very few places in Bombay where you get to experience a roof like this. So we really wanted to bring that out. We did it by uplighting the roof. So when you are in the space, when you're dining there, your eyes are immediately kind of drawn upwards onto those beautiful wooden textures. The architects have spent months kind of painstakingly scraping off the white paint that was on the ceiling. And what you see is like a remnant of history. And the light helps exaggerate the scale and the verticality of the space. Originally, the architects were not entirely convinced by this lighting design scheme. They thought it would be too dark, but we did very many mock-ups. A lot of tweaking, a lot of testing, and right now everyone loves it, which is great. When you know how to modulate light, you can also pick a focus, right? So this is an exercise in modulating intensity. This was the city's only Negroni bar. It's also based in IFB on the ground floor. And so obviously the focus had to be on the bar itself, right? We wanted the space to feel very warm, very inviting, which is why we used warm light. But unlike most bars, we really wanted the focus to remain on the architecture itself. So there are no glitzy, glamorous, shiny chandeliers that you see in the space. All the lighting fixtures are concealed. They're concealed in the bar. They're concealed on your floating rack. They're even concealed underneath the sculpture that you see at the bottom. So on your bottom right, you will see this ginormous sculpture, which are actually the original cooling coils of the ice factory. And we've underlit it to bring out the form. Moving from a very warm space to a very cool space. This is Tark, a contemporary art gallery founded by Henna Kapadia, based in Bombay. This is also housed in a 100-year-old building. From outside, you can see it seems quite warm. Originally, though, the space had very little natural light. The architect, Gotok Kastushi, has designed these beautiful arch doors, which are centrally hinged. So they open up like the wings of a butterfly. So our lighting design also had to have the same lightness of being. We've designed this beautiful line of light that goes through the ceiling. At the bottom are your fixtures, your track lights, which focus on the art. And on the top, we custom fabricated this 180-degree diffused light, which gives you ambient light in the space. So your quality of light can switch very fast from being this very soft, diffused ambient light to really focusing on the artwork. I wanted to share with you a series of work by the artist Daku from a recently completed show held at Tark itself. All the 4 works that you see here are composed of the exact same pattern of uniformly arranged pins. But because they are exposed to different beams of light, the compositions created by the shadows are different. As viewers move around the work goes from being 2D, a 2D shadow composition, to actually being 3D when you see how the pins also play a part. And this is a great example of how light, apart from just lighting the artworks, can also form an essential element in the artist's imagination when he's actually creating a work of art. Moving from micro to macro, this is a farmhouse that we designed in Nagpur, where we've completed the interior, the facade, and the landscape lighting. This is the entrance to the central courtyard. And originally, the courtyard that you see with the statue had to have a bonfire. But this was changed, but we really wanted to retain that feeling of the courtyard being the heart of the home. And so we grazed the walls of the courtyard, which are this wonderful laterite. And when you're sitting there on a cold winter night, you really do feel that same kind of warmth and security you would get around a bonfire. As important as it is to light the interiors, it's also very important not to overlight structures. So for example, in the pool, which is the bar near the pool side, we took a deliberate decision to keep the lighting very simple and very low. The pool itself has no light in it because no one swims in it during the day. You have your emergency safety lights, but they're never on. So it forms a mirror for your bar above. And we really wanted the pool side to be a place where you can connect to nature, right? So we've lit, of course, certain trees, but also a place where you can see the dark sky. You can experience the difference between a full moon night and a no moon night, and really experience the conversation that artificial lighting and natural light have with each other and how that changes. So hopefully the examples that I shared so far will give you an idea as to how you can modulate light to transform your interior spaces. But for us in the studio, the most important way in which we modulate light is through intention. I'm going to share 2 projects with the same architect. And they're going to show you why and how intention really matters, right? In the first one, we'll show you how to make light invisible. And in the second is how to make everything visible. So this is a beautiful library, again designed by Praveer and Chintan from Studio Hinge. And the feeling that they wanted you to experience when you went through this library was similar to the one that you would feel if you were reading underneath the trees. Don't miss your inlaid leaf pattern of fallen leaves on the ground. From a lighting design perspective, it was quite challenging because there was this forest of branches that went through the space. You had canopies crisscrossing all over each other. There were very, very delicate architectural sections on which we had to mount the lights. And then there were these sleek bookshelves where each of the shelves was staggered, which means that if you gave light from on top, the shelf above would cast a shadow on the shelf below, and so none of your titles of your books in your library would be visible. And if that wasn't challenging enough, we wanted to make sure that the light fixtures themselves were not visible and they kind of disappeared in the space. So we managed to achieve quite a lot from that wish list. I'll take you through how. Ambient light was provided by these super wide floods that were mounted on the intersecting nodes of your canopy. The fixtures were carefully chosen for the nature of the reflector, as well as the fact that we gave them a very deep recess. And so the effect that you have is quite magical, because unless you're standing right underneath the source, from a distance you cannot tell whether the light is on or off. We also uplit the canopies. So what you have is this wonderful web of shadows created above you to kind of reinforce this feeling that you're walking underneath trees. And then the bookshelves themselves had very sleek fixtures integrated within the bookshelf. We used the body of a very sleek luminaire, but we gave it the optic of an asymmetric fixture, so that the entire bookshelf is lit. Now, this was a challenge because to make sure that the offset from the titles of the books, that offset was very important, as well as the spacing in between the fixtures along the curve, because otherwise you would get these bands of light and shadow. So again, many mock-ups, many variations, many iterations to get this right. So the end result is something that's come together quite nicely. You have everyone from young kids to grandparents enjoying the space. Library membership has gone up, which is exactly what you want, in this increasingly digital world. The next project is, I want to share is for the Bath Studio. This is a retail showroom, again designed by Praveen of Studio Hinge. It's located in Pune. And we had many discussions on what the light intention was for this project. So because it's located on the first floor of a residential building, you have a lot of passers-by going through. So the idea was to have a conversation between your cool light and your warm light of your balconies. So then when people walk through the space, that image sticks in their mind. They remember it, they want to come back, and they want to see what's going on. This is what the interiors of the space look like. So the showroom is designed for the Bath Studio, which retails windows and door sections, cladding systems. And the architect's idea was, instead of just displaying the products, they designed the entire space to look like a gallery using the different elements. And so our lighting really had to pick up on those various elements, and so we lit it like we would in a gallery. It was tricky because we had to hide our fixtures in your veneerings that you see on the ceiling without casting shadows on the space below. So this is how the space looks during the day. We also took our lighting design intention for how the space would look after night from daylight. So you get these very sharp shadows as the sun moves from across the sky at different parts of the studio. And we wanted to retain this at night. We didn't want the space to look flat. So this is how it looks during the day, and this is how it looks at night. So the question I really want to leave you with today is, what intention are you going to bring to light today? Thank you.